In the girls' hostel, Nimisha was out of breath and panting heavily. Her hair was disheveled as she stood in front of the mirror trying to tie her hair back, but her anxiety made it impossible for her to do anything. That night, for the first time, Nimisha regretted her habit of staying up late. She was scared that someone was still following her. This fear began when Manisha and Nimisha both studied at a boarding school and lived in the hostel. The boarding school they attended was considered a very good institution for education, but the story of the girls' hostel was quite different. 5 years ago, a simple and promising girl from the 9th grade died on the 5th floor of that boarding school's girls' hostel. No one could understand how that girl had died. Teachers and parents said that the girl had neither depression nor any pressure from studies. Initially, everyone thought it was a murder, but the police never found any evidence, which led to the case being closed. However, year after year, rumors began to spread that the ghost of that girl now haunted the 5th floor. So the school authorities closed that floor, opening it only once a week for cleaning. About 5 years after that incident, Nimisha and Manisha started sharing a room in that hostel. Their routine was quite fitting. Nimisha would stay up all night, studying, and wake Manisha up at 7 a.m. before going to sleep. Then Manisha would study until breakfast time. Manisha wore glasses and always had a black thread given by her mother tied around her wrist. Like the other students, they didn't really believe in the stories about the floor, but still, no one went there. But on December 10th, something happened that Manisha had no idea about. Nimisha was sitting in the room, studying at 12:30 a.m., while Manisha was sleeping on the other side. Suddenly, Nimisha's throat became dry, and she got up to make coffee in the hall. The entire hall was completely silent. Everyone was either in their rooms or asleep. There was no one in the hall, just the sound of the coffee machine rumbling. After the machine finished, silence fell again. Nimisha turned around with her coffee mug and suddenly got a shock, causing her coffee to spill. Manisha was standing right behind her. Due to the darkness, Nimisha could only see half of her face. That night, Manisha looked a bit different. She wasn't wearing her glasses, and she didn't have that black thread on her wrist. Nimisha asked Manisha why she woke up so early, to which Manisha replied, "Why don't we go to the 5th floor balcony?" Hearing this, Nimisha's eyes widened and a mischievous smile appeared on her face. Before she could say anything, Manisha grabbed her hand and started leading her up the stairs. As they climbed, only the sound of Nimisha's slippers could be heard. She noticed that Manisha wasn't wearing any slippers either. Something felt very strange that night. The door to the 5th floor of the hostel was open, and they both went up there. They looked around for a bit, and then a few minutes later, they found themselves in a room. It was the same room of the girl who had died 5 years ago, and people said her spirit roamed the 5th floor. But neither Nimisha nor Manisha knew about that room. The weather was very cold that night, and cold winds were blowing in through the windows on the 5th floor, while fog was settling in the darkness of the night. In the meantime, Nimisha's eyes fell on the wall, where someone had scratched out Tenet December with their nails. Both stood on the balcony, looking down. Manisha had been quietly wandering for a long time. Nimisha was feeling very cold, so she told Manisha to go down. But Manisha didn't pay any attention to her. Nimisha tried to call out to Manisha again, and for the first time, Manisha looked into her eyes. Nimisha felt like her senses were leaving her. Manisha's eyes had turned completely white. In a very slow voice, she said, "Jump, Nimisha." Manisha couldn't understand why she was telling her to jump down. All the color drained from her face. As the seconds passed, Manisha's voice grew heavier. She kept looking into Nimisha's eyes and repeatedly said, "Jump, jump." Nimisha's face turned pale, and her hands and feet were stuck in one position, as if she were being hypnotized. It felt like if she didn't jump, Manisha would push her down. Nimisha's eyes began to close, and she started to let her hair down. Her disheveled hair started to sway in the air like water. Nivesha was slowly starting to fall under Manisha's influence. But just then, a loud bang came from the floor below, and Nivesha snapped back to her senses. She somehow gathered her courage and pushed Manisha away, running down the stairs. In a hurry, he heard a very terrifying roar behind him. But she didn't dare to look back even as for a moment. He quickly entered his room and closed the door tightly. What she saw then made her even more shocked. She saw that Manisha was comfortably sleeping on the bed in the same position she had left her. Nimisha's big face turned pale. She shook Manisha, awake in a panic. Seeing her pale face and red eyes, Manisha hugged the frightened Nimisha. And when he asked, Nimisha did not tell him anything. She wasn't in a state to say anything. That night, Nimisha washed her face in front of the bathroom mirror, tied her hair up, and went to sleep. Manisha couldn't understand anything. From that day on, Nimisha started sleeping at night and began to ignore her roommate. Whenever Manisha sat in the room and started studying, she felt as if someone was staring at her. And it was often Nimisha. Worried, Manisha asked her again what had happened that night. Finally, Nivesha told Manisha everything that happened that night. After hearing everything, Manisha's mind started racing, and she completely believed Nimisha's story, because Manisha knew this. A girl died on the same date 5 years ago, December 10th. Meaning, whatever stories Manish and Nimisha had been hearing were all true. There really was a ghost of that girl on the floor. Since that day, the two of them stopped talking about the 5th floor altogether. But they have not been able to forget that horrifying story to this day.